life does go on, and Bone is going to join us, being the trooper that he is, for our Bama Football Recruiting Report that we bring you every week. How you doing, Bone?
I'm good, Gary. How are you?
Hanging in there, buddy. The first thing I want to ask you is just to go ahead and because I know we're all dealing with this stuff, but yet Alabama football fans are Alabama football fans, and that's not going to change. And I've had a lot of questions and people saying, make sure you have Bone on to explain exactly right now, while we're in this situation with the Southeastern Conference, basically having closed out and shut down all the spring sports and winter sports, but no activities until the earliest at April 15th. Just go ahead and tell us, if you will, where that stands with recruiting. What can be done? Can anything be done right now? Even phone calls, correspondence. How are these schools like Alabama and other SEC schools, and what restrictions are they under right now in terms of recruiting potential student athletes for their football program?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a pretty different for everyone in the country. With everything that's going on, and something that's just kind of unprecedented. And, this was going to be a very busy time for Alabama. Now, this week wasn't necessarily going to be a busy time because Alabama was going on spring break. Right. And that's what the coaches are doing right now. They are on a little bit of a break right now. I mean, hadn't had really much of a break since the end of the end of the recruiting year. So, this is a time where they're all kind of, just on the road, vacationing, at the beach or whatever they may be doing. But, they're also keeping in contact with recruits, speaking to them on the phone, speaking to them on, through social media, through text messages. So a lot of that's still going on. Even though there's no on-campus visits or in-person evaluations or anything like that happening, there's still plenty of recruiting that's going on. And, a lot of conversations that are still being had. And I'm sure, with Alabama only having one commitment at this time, I'm sure they're hoping one of these guys will decide to go ahead and pull the trigger and maybe relieve a little bit of pressure that may be on them a little bit in terms of getting some more guys on board. But it's certainly a very weird time with everything that's going on. But there's no slowing down in terms of coaches speaking to recruits on the phone and talking to them through social media, through text, and there's still a lot of conversations going on at this time.
Indeed, and you laid that out really, really well. You mentioned it. We talked about it the last couple of weeks. Of course, you couldn't foresee this, but Alabama does only have one commitment in the 2021 class. And as you said, this was going to be spring break, but there should have already been one practice in the books. And then coming back next Monday, Alabama was going to start back practicing all the way up until the A-Day game, which is always a signature day. We still, I think, feel positive that somewhere along the line you're going to get these 15 practices in. There won't be a spring game per se, but you're hoping that. But you're right. This ratchets things up a little bit in regards to where Alabama stands, because once had the regular calendar been in place, that was going to be some heavy recruiting pitches going on through the spring, through A-Day. Now that's gone, Bone.
Yeah, and I know. Probably to people that don't pay as much attention as maybe some of us do on the recruiting front, they may look at it and say, well, it's still March, it's 11 months until signing day, there's still a lot of time left to recruit. Everybody's kind of in the same boat. Well, the problem at least with Alabama right now is they were expected to have a lot of recruits on campus over the course of the next month, right? For spring practice, for the spring game. And it wasn't just kids visiting Alabama. A lot of these kids were taking multiple visits, whether they were going to, it's their spring break. So they're taking 4 or 5 visits that week to go see a bunch of different schools and then, potentially make a decision at the beginning of the summer or midsummer. Now a lot of that's pushed back. So a lot of these guys, a lot of these big name guys, Alabama, recruits all these top end guys who want to take their visits. They want to enjoy the recruiting process. They want to take official visits, and official visits were going to begin in April. This is the year that they were going to start having official visits in April, and so a lot of kids were going to start visiting, taking their officials, and then making their decisions. Now, all of that's pushed back. All these kids are. And a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them are going to take all their visits still. They're going to at least visit a few schools, and now that's pushed back. And we don't know how long that's going to be pushed back till. Obviously, they've come out and said, at least until April the 15th. That's not the end of it.
That's right.
We may know in a couple of weeks if it's the end of it, but it could continue to get pushed back, and we may not see kids even allowed on campus until at least the summer. So that's really going to affect things, obviously from an Alabama perspective and national perspective. But you look at some of these other top schools throughout the country that have multiple commitments, that have, some of them have 10-plus commitments. And, they're sitting pretty good right now, whereas Alabama, is having to wait at this time. And I don't necessarily see it being a major problem right now, as long as, a lot of these guys that they're recruiting don't make decisions. And as long as they can get these guys on campus at some point. But, a lot of their top-tier targets that we're going to visit this month or next month, they're still out there. They're still, they haven't made a decision yet. But it does affect in terms of when they might make a decision, as opposed to when Alabama, if Alabama's going to get their commitment. Yeah,
it certainly does. As you said, there are still some discussions and correspondence going on, and you alluded to this earlier. If a player, and again, it's probably awkward for the prospects right now because they're used to having an agenda for them laid out by the different schools and visits and so forth. But if a prospect wanted to recruit or wanted to commit, he could do that, right? He's allowed, if he came out and said, I'm committing to X school, he can do that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And we saw a big commitment for Ohio State yesterday, and Evan Pryor, a big 4-star running back out of North Carolina. And there's kids that are making decisions. Not a lot of them, but there are some that are making decisions. I think one of the biggest things that people are forgetting about right now is in terms of a lot of these outer region kids that are, let's say, they need to fly. I mean, obviously domestic travel hasn't been shut down, but, families that aren't taking flights right now. They're,
right.
They're being extremely cautious in terms of traveling. So, that's really going to push things back. If Alabama's recruiting, let's say, a guy from Miami or California or Virginia, a lot of these guys are kind of on hold right now and not traveling. And it's going to be interesting to kind of see how much that may affect, kids even making their decisions. How many kids will Alabama be able to get from out of the region, because some of these guys aren't going to be flying, but, they may not fly the entire year.
Andrew Bone with us, senior recruiting analyst for BamaInsider.com, part of the Rivals.com network, our weekly Bama football recruiting report. You as a recruiting analyst and reporter, how are you handling this? Are you calling prospects less because of the situation and because there's not as much news? How are you going about your business in regards to recruiting coverage at Bama Insider?
Well, what we're doing right now is, probably doing more feature stories with guys, kind of talking to recruits, kind of seeing what's going on, what they're doing during this time period. And we'll do more, background stories on recruits during this time in terms of, not just interviewing them about their visit to Alabama or, their top 5 schools, do more stuff on, kind of their life growing up. How they got into football, when they started getting recruited, what their family life is like, in terms of, did any of them play sports, and then really kind of break down, schools that are recruiting them heavily still, and how often they're continuing to talk to these schools, even though they're not visiting. How often, they may be talking to Alabama at this time. So we're doing a lot of feature stories like that. Really going to pick up, and we'll be breaking down position-wise, who Alabama's top targets are at each position. And obviously that was, the spring's a big, a good evaluation time period. So what we're going to probably see Alabama doing, from in terms of offering, we'll probably see more offers go out because this is kind of giving Alabama a time period where they can watch more film, evaluate more kids, instead of being out there at practice right now. they're able to watch, plenty of highlights, plenty of game films, and continue to evaluate guys. And we'll see some guys, potentially move ahead of others that are on the recruiting board who've been offered. We'll probably see, several more offers that will come out this spring, just based on, coaches being able to watch more film.
Getting ready to wrap up with Andrew Bone. Again, we don't know the timetable of this situation, how far it could extend. Hopefully we'll be back to normal sooner rather than later. Again, from your perspective and the different recruiting services and, the 7-on-7 camps and all of the different things that go on at the beginning of the spring through the summer, how could that potentially be impacted, these showcases and these opportunities for these high school players to be involved and show off their talents? Is there any concern from your perspective in that business that those may be halted or not be held the way that they normally are going forward?
Yeah, big time. As of right now, most of them are postponed or even canceled. So, usually the spring is a tremendous opportunity for guys like us to, even though you go out and you get to see kids and you see kids at their high school, in terms of seeing potentially a guy going to Alabama go up against a guy from Georgia at a football camp during the spring, you're not being able to do that this year. And, that's a big part of the recruiting evaluation period. And it's a big tool for guys like us in terms of evaluations. Obviously, I don't like to just look at kids that they're at a football camp without pads on. We look at highlight films, we go to practices, go to games, and that's just part of it. I mean, but it's a big part of it because you finally get a chance to see, a kid going up against another player that's, maybe equal caliber. And, it stinks that you're not going to be able to see that this year. And I don't know if they're going to end up, having camps at all. It may just be, you may have team camps, college camps like Alabama, Auburn, Georgia, places like that. But in terms of having a rivals camp or an opening camp or anything like that, it certainly looks like those won't happen this year.
Wow. Well, it is, it's as we've said, it's unprecedented for all of us to go through something like this. We're trying to get through it together. Before I turn you loose, Bone, as a reporter, I do want to ask you if there is anyone out there that is potentially on commitment watch that you think might pull the trigger for Alabama, even with all that's going on. Anybody that comes to mind that you think could be close to a commitment to the Crimson Tide?
There's no kids right now that have a decision date in mind. I'm always kind of keeping an eye on, a few players. JaQuincy McKinstry, who's the number one player in the state of Alabama, also known as Kool-Aid from Pinson Valley, who has offers from, several schools in Alabama several schools in football and basketball, including Alabama. And, he's always somebody that I feel like is a strong lean to Alabama, but, could just make a decision anytime. Brian Thomas, who's a 4-star receiver out of Louisiana, somebody that I feel like Alabama's been in the driver's seat for a while. Those are probably two guys that, always keeping an eye on, but, you just never know when they're going to make a decision. And at this time, nobody's currently has a commitment date in mind in terms of any Alabama targets.
Okay, and we know this, Bone, whatever happens in recruiting and however this thing winds through as we go through it, you're going to have it for them at BamaInsider.com.
Absolutely, yeah. Please still follow us at BamaInsider.com. We got a lot of stuff still going on. Even though it's a slow period, we're trying to stay busy every single day and crank out content. You can follow me on my Twitter handle at Andrew J. Bone, and you can also subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube, search BamaInsider.com, hit subscribe. Doesn't cost you any money. And, we'll have plenty of videos on our YouTube channel, every week.
Andrew, we appreciate it as always. Thanks, man.
Gary, thank you, man.